Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Homeschool and Chill, the YouTube channel that seeks to alleviate your stress and anxiety about homeschooling. My name is Corinne, and today I want to talk to you about teaching your children about race. So, if you've been paying attention to anything that's been going on in our nation recently, there has been a lot of unrest and protesting against social injustice because of the death of Black people or the merciless murdering of unarmed Black people in the United States. Pretty much the straw that broke the camel's back was the murder of George Floyd, who was unarmed and was suspected of using a counterfeit $20 bill. And when police were called, he was apprehended and he was held down with a knee in his neck for, I've seen different reports that say between 7 and 9 minutes. And he was saying that he couldn't breathe. Bystanders said that he needed help, that he couldn't breathe, and police officers still held him restrained until he died. So that was like the straw that broke the camel's back in this whole entire thing. And once again, America is outraged and people are taken to the streets by protesting. Social media is flooded with posts talking about the event and seeking justice. And there have been riots and looting that have been taking place as well. So because of everything that's going on right now, of course, I have been very active on social media and trying to find out different ways that I can use my voice and different ways that I can actually be actively involved in our community, finding different ways to boycott and to make change for Black people and for people of color in general, and for this entire nation to truly live up to what it says that it stands for. And in the midst of it all, I've been looking at my children and seeing their innocence through it all, even though I'm sitting here concerned about them and wondering, what I can do to make this world a better place for them and children like them. I've been sort of shielding my children from everything. And I honestly don't know how to feel about it. And that's what this whole video is about. Unlike a lot of my other videos where I pretty much, I have some knowledge in a lot of areas and I'm sharing that knowledge to help you out. This video is pretty much showing that I am in this along with you and I kind of just don't know what to do. To tell you a little bit about my homeschool, if you're new and you haven't watched any of my other videos, I consider our homeschool an Afrocentric homeschool. And I try to be extremely honest with my children about anything that they learn. A lot of things that I think most parents don't talk to their children about because they're not old enough or different things. I just find a more age-appropriate way to break those things down to them. Even like with learning about where babies come from and all that. I don't give them all of the illicit details, but I do tell them where babies come from, where they know that it requires, a man and a woman coming together and that their DNA comes together, that there's a sperm and there's an egg and, all of those different things my girls are very aware of. When it comes to these issues, I don't want to necessarily just keep my children completely shielded, but I'm at a loss at the best way to break it to them because, for one, I am like any parent who wants to preserve their child's innocence. We don't want to bring the ugliness and the goriness of what the real world is like to our children at a very young age. We want them to enjoy their childhood and enjoy just being happy and feeling like the world is not so bad of a place. I want them to grow up believing that the police officer is their friend and all of those things. But at the same time, there's a part of me that feels like my children really need to know what's going on in the world and that my children at a young age need to go ahead and be prepared for what the world is like so that they can better navigate through this world that they live in. Another part of all of this, like I said, we have an Afrocentric homeschool. And so that means that we pretty much center everything that we learn from an African American or African perspective. And in doing that, I wanted to be very sure that everything that I taught my girls about being Black, that from the beginning, I wanted my girls to grow up seeing how beautiful it is being Black and to have a sense of pride in being Black and loving who they are. I wanted that to be their first introduction to being Black. I wanted that to be, their first realization that they are Black by seeing all these beautiful, wonderful aspects of what it is to be Black. And I didn't want their first introduction to being Black to be, somebody disrespecting them or mistreating them and me having to explain why it happened. I didn't want their first introduction to being Black to be, them learning about slavery and, the civil rights movement. I wanted them to learn about the beauty of Africa and our people, our culture, our music, our styles, all of these wonderful things. But it seems like even though I'm trying to do that first, that just because of the type of world that we live in and the type of urgency that there is for our children to know who they are and how people see them, that I can't really do things quite the way that I want to. Or at least if I do, I feel like I'm hiding something from my children. And even, I was on Facebook and I made a post talking about that where I said, I just happened to be scrolling through Facebook and I was cuddling with my girls. And my 6-year-old is seeing some of the pictures that I'm scrolling past. I'm trying to scroll by quickly so that I don't have to have a conversation, but she's quick with it. So anyway, she starts asking questions. There was a photograph that went along with an article that was talking about how the KKK was preparing to rally. And so they had on all of their, what's the word I want to use for it? Not just their garb or their disguise or whatever, but like their coward clothing that hides their face so you can't really see who they are. So anyway, I showed her, I was scrolling and she saw that and she was asking like, why are these people dressed up? And I think she even mentioned, it's not Halloween. Why are they dressed up? And, I'm scrolling past other pictures where she sees people protesting. She sees pictures of officers being violent with people. She sees people looting and all these different things, and she has questions. I said, I'm the type of parent where I always want to answer my girls' questions. That's part of their homeschooling, that, there's some things that I plan and then there's things that are just self-directed, where if they want to know it, I will provide them the resources so that they can learn it. And even though I kind of kept my answers really quick or tried to kind of, avoid answering her fully, there's a part of me that felt like I do need to tell her about these things. But I don't know exactly how to go about it because I don't want to hand over too much to a 6-year-old. She's only 6 years old. And I explained to her that she's young and that most parents try to protect their children from knowing just how bad the world is. And so we don't tell them everything bad that's going on in the world. And that maybe I should just talk to her about these things when she's a little older. And with a very straight face, she said, but I'm 6 years old. But I'm 6 years old. And she went on to tell me, that I'll be in second grade soon. And when I first started first grade, I wasn't old enough to be in first grade, but I was able to do it anyway. So I should be able to do it. And anyway, I'll be 7 soon. And that's closer to being 10. And she was, trying to give me all of these reasons of why she was ready to hear this very heavy message that I was keeping from her. But I went on to, talking to my husband because I kind of wanted to see how he felt about it. And we really didn't come to an answer, but one of the questions that I posed to him was, when did you first learn about all this? When did you first discover that you were Black? When did you first realize that being Black had its came along with a lot of negativity, in the United States? When did you really learn about all of this stuff? And he couldn't really remember. It's pretty much like he always knew. And I said that I couldn't really remember like a defining moment of, learning about all of this stuff. It kind of felt like I always knew because it seems like I knew from a very young age. And one example that I even gave him was when I was in second grade. So that meant I had to be like 7 or 8 years old, depending on what, when exactly it was during the school year. But anyway, between 7 and 8 years old, I remember that I guess we were learning something in school that had to do with, I don't know if it was the civil rights movement or whatever the case was, whatever we were learning about. And so part of our lesson was discussing, I guess, the appropriate name for Black people. And the teacher was telling us that, the appropriate terminology for a Black person or a person with brown skin is to call them African American. That was being taught when, I was in second grade. And so that was part of what we were learning. And like most teachers do, she taught the lesson. And then after the lesson, she asked questions and everyone raises their hand to try to answer the questions about what was being taught. And I remember very clearly that the teacher asked us in part of our review, what do we call people with brown skin? What do we call Black people? What is the right word for it? And I remember this girl very clearly. I remember this girl, Angela, who was in my class, a white girl with blue eyes and fiery red hair. And she was actually one of my friends. And I remember when the teacher called on her, the answer that she gave was niggers. And she had a very straight face when she said it, and like being that we were in second grade and the fact that she just openly said that in a classroom full of students and in front of her teacher, I really don't think that she understood what the word meant herself, as a child. But nowhere in our lesson was that word used at all. The teacher was horrified that she said it, was quick to try to correct her, like, no, we don't say that. No, that's not a good word. We don't say that. The answer is African Americans. Everyone understand it's African Americans. Like, the teacher started having a fit. And so I don't know if she really understood what she said. However, she had to have heard it somewhere, and she knew what context in which to use the word. She knew that that was a word that was used specifically for Black people. So that was being taught to her at a young age. And I remember being in that classroom, and I don't know, I can't really say, I remember that was a defining moment for me, like from what was going on, the lessons that we had in class, that I was really beginning to understand that I was a Black person because we were talking about it. So around that time was really when I started to realize, like, okay, I am a Black person. This is what it means to be Black. But I remember that already as a second grader, I understood that what she said was wrong. It wasn't just an incorrect answer. I knew that it was wrong. I remember the minute that she said that word, that inside I was like, I was shocked that she said it, because that was a bad word to say, that you don't call us that, So that's a point to prove that, one, our children are going to start learning these things whether we teach them or not. So we should probably be the ones to instruct them so that they're getting the right message and not getting whatever message the world feeds to them. And two, that kind of let me know that I was pretty young when I learned these things. And like I said, I don't really remember my parents sitting me down and saying, hey, we are Black and this is how America treats us and all this kind of stuff. I think that my parents were just very open with what was going on around us. No matter how hard it was, they just made it so that they weren't really hiding it from us. I do remember being, a child and watching certain TV shows where they address issues like that. My mom loved watching A Different World, and I watched it along with her, and they talked about issues like this. I remember hearing about the riots because of Rodney King. I remember my parents watching certain movies like Mississippi Burning, and I remember even my parents watching this movie called Serafina, which was about apartheid, and I believe a student who was really leading a lot of protests against apartheid in South Africa. So I was very, very small when all of this was going on. So I think my parents just allowed me to be exposed to what the world was like. And I don't know, it's really hard when I sit here and I look at my innocent girls' faces that I do want them to still be, wide-eyed, bright-eyed, innocent little girls. But I do feel like a lot of this stuff starts when they're really small, unfortunately. Racist children, they get their education on how to be racist at a very young age. And so I do think that it's crucial for us that while our children are little, to go ahead and educate them, but not to leave out all those beautiful, wonderful aspects that I talked about before. That's crucial too. And I think in a lot of Black families, we leave that out. We talk a lot about the struggle and what we've got to go through being a Black person, but we don't spend enough time telling our children that their hair is beautiful, their skin is beautiful, what we've contributed to this nation, and all of these different things. I don't think we spend quite enough time doing that. And I think for one thing, it's just because American culture doesn't promote that. That's not the mainstream. And a lot of that is oppressed and suppressed. And even in education, when we send our children off to school somewhere, they're not going to get that. They're not going to receive that. And in most cases, our children are exposed to a lot of things that will make them feel inferior or feel like they're just not normal. I mean, if we look at even some things that seem simple and, I guess really subtle, they have hints of racism in them. Like I can't even tell you how many times that there has been Spirit Week at school somewhere and they have wacky hair day, and the hairstyles that some white children come to school with are hairstyles that are natural black hairstyles. You know, they'll come to school with an afro, and it's like, so wacky hair is wearing your hair like a black person. Or, you know, white girls will have a bunch of braids or twists all over their hair, and it's like, that's how we style little black girls' hair. We put lots of ponytails and twists or braids and barrettes in their hair, but then when a white girl does it, it's wacky hair for Spirit Week. So even little things that seem cute or funny they're things that are teaching our children that you're not normal, you're strange, you're odd. It's making fun of our culture and the things that we consider to be beautiful. Hard as it is, that it is necessary to go ahead and teach our children these things while they are still very small. Now, how to go about doing that, I don't know. I don't know how to sit there and explain to a 6-year-old that the police officers who were supposed to be the good guys, that they actually murdered an innocent man. I don't know how to explain that. I don't know how to explain that to my 5-year-old who actually says that she wants to be a police officer when she grows up. I don't know how to explain that. And that's what makes all of this so frustrating and so difficult, because, you know, we're literally having to choose between preserving our child's innocence for just a little while longer, or just trying to help them navigate this world a little more easily by already understanding what's going on in the world around them. And, you know, it's not fair. It's not fair. But I do hope that those of my subscribers out there, or those of you who are watching, who do happen to be white and you're raising your children, I hope that you would take that time to educate your children at a young age too about how to treat somebody fairly and how to make things a little more comfortable for children like mine growing up, to not make them feel like the way that God created them is somehow wrong or inferior. I just hope that while all this is going on, all this unrest and all of us seeking justice, that somehow in this, it'll all be worth it. That everything that we're all going through, the fear, the confusion, the uncertainty, the discomfort, whatever you want to call it, I hope that all of it ends up being worth it, and that there is some kind of change one day, and that we're not doing the same thing 60 years from now as we were doing 60 years ago. I hope that we find a way to educate our babies about all of this in a way that's beneficial to them, and that's not too much for them, but just enough for them to know what they need to do to navigate this world, and where they just understand why things are a certain way. If you do have some kind of suggestion, or maybe you've already gone through this with your children, type that in the comments. Let's talk about it. What would you do? How do you bring up these issues to your children in a way to really educate them in the best way possible? I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you like, share, and subscribe. But most of all, I hope that you love yourself and love others around you, no matter how different they may be. Bye, loves.